right.
Hey, everybody. You
I've
got
got
it?
it.
You got it. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of How to Make a Movie When You Don't Know Shit. And today is our guest, Chris Kelly. A little bit about Chris Kelly. He's the former chief privacy officer of Facebook. Also the first privacy officer of Facebook I have here too. He's the executive producer of our film Once Upon a Time in Queens, which was originally called Last I Heard. He has also executive produced the narrative film Olive and the documentary Euro Dreams of Sushi, and has most recently executive produced the limited series The Tent Mender, which we can watch now on IMDb TV. And he also happens to be my brother-in-law. So here he is, everybody. Chris Kelly joining us on a Labor Day weekend. I love it.
Yeah. It's been a nice Labor Day so far. I enjoyed Bottle Rock up in Napa Valley yesterday. Saw the Foo Fighters last night.
Wow. How was that?
Back again. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
But having a nice, relaxing Labor Day. I've got the Giants game on in the other room, and as they keep beating the Dodgers, well, they're not. It's the Rockies today. So
yes, yeah, that's great. Yeah, it sounds like a nice, relaxing weekend. And thank you so much for doing this. We obviously, it's always more difficult to interview people that because I know so much, and you've done so much. There's really literally no way we could cover everything. But I do want to say the thing that has surprised me the most about you is I watched a clip of you doing karaoke, and you can sing. I was like,
I found I never thought I could sing, but I can tell you that through karaoke during the pandemic, my friend Andrew Burns has been hosting regular karaoke, and I've managed to, I do all right. It's not, I usually do Tom Petty, which means that I don't really have to sing.
Right.
But it, so there's some margin for error. But I've broadened my horizons and experimented with some things that have worked better than I thought they would. So
yeah, I mean, I was watching you do Shallow, and I was like, all right, this is an unknown talent. And I'm like, now I got to come up there and do karaoke with you. I'm excited.
Well, that was one that I did not think I could pull off, and it came together much better than I expected. So
it was awesome. It was great. Yeah, so many.
I got my grizzled Bradley Cooper beard, and
you're all set. You're ready for the remake.
Bradley Cooper, a great Georgetown grad. So
yes, he is. Yes, and that's your one of your alma maters there. So what I want to talk about a little bit is so on some of the earlier podcasts, I talk about how I came to get involved in Last I Heard, and my original thing was to act in it and use it as a vehicle for that. And the late great Dave Rodriguez is how I got involved. I knew Dave from some films he had done with my dad. But tell us a little bit.
I'm still stunned that Dave is gone, and
we're shocked.
What he did on this was just exceptional, and it's one of those movies that I hope will kind of show up somewhere along the way when somebody kind of gets it, and it turns into one of those fun cult classics.
I think so too, and that's part of the reason that I wanted to do the podcast. Kind of to honor his memory, because this really was his passion project. I mean, he went on to really do every television series in Los Angeles after this film, and just was a great director.
Very, very successful television series director. He did NCIS and a bunch of different series, and was just respected for his craft. And this is a work that he put together extraordinarily well with the help of the rest of the crew, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm still stunned that he's gone.
Yeah, we're all in shock. It's one of those people that you just never. I just had dinner with Paul Ben Victor and Johnny Roastbeef and Lev Gorin, a couple of the guys from the film, and it's just like he would be here right now. He would be at Ray. I was like, this would, it just seems so.
He would be an incredibly fun addition to this podcast.
Absolutely, yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you remember from that time. I mean, I think we had met a couple of times. I had come up to Sundance and met you for the very first time. Kevin and I were still dating. We were not engaged or married or any of that. And I guess it was Kevin, obviously, that brought it to you. But what was sort of your experience from the beginning?
Well, I had done Giro already, and I had looked at a number of different narrative films, and I think that I had already started with Olive. And the most notable thing about Olive, of course, was that the first full-length feature shot entirely on cell phone cameras.
Amazing. Where can people see that? Where can people watch
all? So it's still available. Clips of it are still available at allofthemovie.com.
Okay.
But Human, who I do the Fander Festival podcast with now,
Mm-hmm.
and I had put that together. It was all Human's, writing, doing, and a guy named Pat Gillis, who's a good guy operates up in Marin County, and we had shot that, put it together. So I was looking for another project, and
Mm-hmm.
Kevin brought this to me, and I said, okay, we can figure out how to do it on a shoestring budget.
Mm-hmm.
Then I can help finance it and help sort of with some connections and
Yeah.
putting it all together.
Yeah.
And with the attachment of Paul Sorvino and Michael
Mm-hmm.
Rappaport and some of the other kind of folks who are pseudo. I mean, Paul Sorvino is a real star, but
Yeah.
Michael Rappaport is actually a real star too. It's just
Yeah.
it was funny. I when they said, hey, we got Michael Rappaport. I'm like, who's that? And then they showed me the picture. I'm like, oh, that guy.
Yes.
And it's funny because on Twitter, he shows up in my Twitter feed all the time talking about the Knicks and basketball and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's the other one of the other thing that I spend a fair amount of my time on is basketball, as you know. So I had confidence that you and Kevin would pull things together, and it came together quite nicely, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, for the fact that we shot it, I think it was 18 days in New York.
Yeah.
And there was a fair amount of, locations and things to be put together. But yeah, I remember, I think you came to set one day when we were shooting in Juniper Park.
Yep.
In Queens.
So we had the park scene, and then the lead up to the kind of, crescendo at the end. And it was fascinating to see.
It was pretty intense. Yeah. And as much as Kevin and I did stuff on it, it really was Dave, he had worked with this crew multiple times, which is, as I'm sure is so important. The crew is just everything, the fact that they knew exactly what he wanted, how to do it in a timely fashion. And he just had, as far as acting goes, he had everybody sort of in the right roles. So everybody could just.
He did. No, he definitely did.
So everybody could just sort of do that. And so then after the film was done, what was the first cut did you see early cuts of it, or did you see?
Yeah, I saw early cuts, and I had gotten used to seeing some of that both from Olive and from I think that we'd had the Olive stuff, but from Jiro especially. I mean, Jiro for what became a incredibly critically acclaimed film that's been unbelievably influential in the documentary circuits. It didn't really come together till the end. The cut that got presented at Tribeca was the first exceptional one.
Yes.
So it sort of meandered a little bit, and Brandon and David were able to really kind of get it into shape. So I knew in early cuts that there were going to be rough edges, no question about it. But then, as it developed, and Dave always had a firm hand on it, and that it was pretty clear that it was going to come together well, and it did. And I think that the Seattle premiere that we were able to get, that was great. Got a little bit of exposure, and that was fun. I had hoped that it would get more notice than it really did, but sometimes
you never know with those things. You just never know. And I think now, especially with the subject matter of the film, I think now even more so than before, it's just very poignant. It's just learning to deal with, because I think one of the major themes of the movie for me is how love really, the father's love for the daughter, and having the support of a neighborhood and a family, and dealing with his own prejudice, racism, all those things, and sort of overcoming that love really changes your perception of everything. It's like you look at things one way.
How family means family, like it's a you have to overcome ideas that you have to support the people who are your people, and that's where I do hope the movie will get noticed for that over time. And I think that the media business and the movie business has been going through unbelievable change. There will be a number of kind of diamonds in the rough that are discovered over time as the discovery engines get better, and as word of mouth gets amplified through social and other things. you have to have a few champions out there, and then once they're out there, things can take off like wildfire.
Yeah, that's what I feel. People that did come to see it. I mean, even my friends, came to see it in LA when we premiered it over at the Lemley, and then when we had Holly Shorts. A lot of people were like, "Wow, this was really good." Like,
Yeah,
just
exactly.
sort of right. They didn't expect, and
Yeah, it's like I'm going to go see my friend's movie, and
yeah,
and because they're my friend, and
yeah.
and then you're like, oh yeah, it's a good movie.
Yeah. Yeah, my one girlfriend was like weeping. She was like, "Wow, I had no idea, what I was coming in to see,
Don't tell Kevin, but the first time that I went to see him as Peter Pan, in kind of child theater, I actually have told him the story, but
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so I got to go because it's my brother, and then I was
Yeah.
like, he's actually pretty good. Wow.
Well, yeah, the closer you are to somebody, and then when you see them in their, environment, it's like I've had that happen with, people that like do my nails or whatever, and then they come see me do stand up. They're like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize you were funny. You're not funny at all when I do your nails."
I mean, I've seen clips of you doing stand up, but I
Yeah.
still haven't seen you live, which is a
Yeah,
total
you got to
bummer.
come live. Yeah, for
We'll
sure.
figure
Now that
it out.
we're starting
Yeah.
to come back, but it was so funny. She's just like, you're never funny when I do your nails. Like, oh, what's funny about doing my nails? Like, I'm not.
Oh, there's a lot you can
And
mine there.
yeah, and then most comics are not like they're usually not really funny in real life. Like, not that they're not funny, but they're usually like more like subdued and quiet, and they're very observant. That's really what comics are, is observant more than like sort of the hands at the parties and stuff. So people are always surprised by that. But when I saw the first cut of the film, I mean, you had a better eye than I did, because I was like, uh-oh. Like, when I saw the first cut, I was like, this is really slow. Like, we gotta, but over time I got to see like, oh, more cuts and more adjustments, and it got better and better. And I think you and I had that experience. Maybe it was at Holly Shorts, where you're like, wow, this film keeps getting better every time I see it. So you're somebody, for me, that always, I just respect you so much. And you always like have your finger on the pulse of like what's coming next. What are some of the things that you think are going to change with, with movies, with theater, with, going forward now?
Well, I mean, the kind of video gaming of the world is continuing in a really big way, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that will include music and movies too,
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of these things will happen in what will become this metaverse that people are starting to talk about. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
going to take some time for that. I do think, unfortunately, that COVID is probably accelerate it's good in the long run that it's accelerated what was an inevitable transformation in theatrical distribution of movies. And as you
Mm-hmm.
know, I've experimented with a number of different plays in that field, both in terms of having the streaming service Fander, which we had to put into reorganization, but Cinedigm now controls, and I'm working with them again
Mm-hmm.
on growing that brand and some of the other brands that they have with the Fander Festival podcast and some other things. And then with MoviePass,
Mm-hmm.
where I always believed that theatrical distribution and sitting in a large room together with people is a great experience that should not
Sure.
go.
Right.
The way that all of the major chains have become real estate plays, the kind of over screening of all of the multiplexes, the business model of that was destroyed, and until until AMC and some of the other things have become kind of Reddit stonks, and they've been able to survive longer than they would have otherwise because of
Mm-hmm.
financial engineering that some of these companies can do for now.
Mm-hmm.
The ultimate change and the ultimate sort of ruling of the consumer when they hear about these things, and the compression of awareness and marketing campaigns leading to film release and finalization, it's compressing, no question about it. And
Mm-hmm.
day and day releases are still going to be few and far between on major movies because of there's still some power in windowing that the studios exercise
Right.
aggressively on the big Marvel movies and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And this
Mm-hmm.
fight over Black Widow and Scarlett Johansson and her compensation is going to
Yeah.
drive, I think, a reasonable compromise eventually between kind of movie star talent and the agencies and the studios,
Mm-hmm.
about how that compression works, but it does not go away in its entirety.
Mm.
But for films like Last I Heard or like Jiro or things like that, day and date is going to become the coin of the realm very quickly. And you want to have a compression of all of your marketing, your awareness marketing on social and other places, be able to drive you to an instant streaming of the film so that it can enter the cultural zeitgeist. You're not expecting to make, say $50 million or up box office. Everything below that is going to need to go day and date eventually. And so the big budgets will drive the aggressive windowing, the theatrical promotion, the including all those things. But everything else will go to instant availability, awareness campaigns that are compressed and that are focused on social and things like that. But I also do think that you'll see a virtualization of some of these watch parties. Facebook has tried to do this, and it's just not time yet. But the idea of getting together with your friends, over time, and sometimes it'll be strapping on an Oculus headset, sometimes it'll be just kind of sitting in your living room and watching something together so it can be discussed together. I do think that's going to be a more normalized behavior over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I really see that too, because I think people are, with the growth of podcasts and even the Clubhouse and those kinds of things, more and more people like to discuss what they've watched. It's and more people are becoming, sort of like armchair experts, in film, and
it's cultural signaling, and it's available to everybody now through Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, from a visual perspective, Snapchat, and on all the others that you can think about how you connect with people around you. My Twitter feed today is full of the sort of proper respect for Michael Williams, who unfortunately passed away yesterday.
Great loss.
Great love for his roles as Omar, but all the other ones too. I mean, that
amazing
Omar,
Boardwalk Empire,
really made him, but he's just an incredible actor who showed up in
very talented.
Time. Yeah.
Very talented. So with Fander, was the goal to have it be similar to a Netflix or a Amazon, where you stream?
Independent film Netflix was always the goal there, and I think we probably hit the market a little bit too early, and we probably weren't as capital efficient as we should have been early on. But needed to spend on branding, and we actually sort of built up, I think, quite a powerful brand at the end of the day, which was one of the reasons that it survived the reorganization process, and that Cinemax could pick it up and operate it again, as a brand, and to fit it in with a number of the other brands that they were acquiring and operating. So when they did that, I had actually been working with a group that was working to kind of take it out of the reorg and reconstitute it. Another group, but when the Cinedigm bid was able to kind of sneak in there and get accepted, they came to me and said, "Hey, no, we want to work with you." And I said, "Yeah, no, I'm a believer in the project." Even if and we have to talk about my taking a financial interest in it again, but I definitely want it to survive and thrive.
Yeah. And would you, is the goal to do original content on there as well?
I think that there will be more and more original content. Well, I always saw, when I was running Fander, I always saw it as the original content would be short form about movies, and so made for social, digestible, 5 minutes or less video essays and things like that, that would capture the that thrill that people get from longer films, and the story arc that works in longer films, but getting into more bite-sized pieces and have a appetite for it in social. And I think that they're definitely moving back to that. So Keyframe, which was our key kind of daily video essay provider at Fander, Keyframe is about to be relaunched. The podcast is part of this, and we're not doing the podcast every day, but we're doing a couple a week, because we wanted to keep them short. One of the things that I found about podcasts, I think sustainably over time, most podcasts shouldn't go more than 15 minutes. This is an exception here.
Right.
But when you're exploring particular subjects, and the way that a lot of the podcasts launched originally, when they're deep deep dives into true crime pieces and splitting them up into 5, stories, and then taking that same format. And I mean, Netflix is doing that in video essays now, effectively. But like there's some things that fit well in that format, and then but most podcasts that are discussion podcasts, you shouldn't be longer than 15 minutes, and that's mostly what we're doing with the Fander Festival podcast.
So that's your time frame now?
Yeah. We've gone, I think we've done probably, we put, I think probably about 12 or 14 in the can at this point. And I think one of them went more than 30 minutes.
Okay. And then with the,
they can be varying lengths, and that's, I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on the shorter podcast. It's interesting because when I first started listening to podcasts, it was like Joe Rogan, and it was like 2 hours long, and then my podcast would go, like the first podcast that I did, Andrea Town, was like an hour and a half. And then you realize that in order to get people to really listen, to really hear, it's better that it's shorter. People can just pop on, they can listen to, because there's just, what I find overwhelming is there's just so much content right now, and I want to listen to everything.
You only have so much time, and
you only have so much time.
The thing that all content providers and media companies that aggregate content and try to make sure that they can make it profitably have to know and learn that there is a limit in all of these cases.
Do you think that'll spill over into films as well? Films and television? Do you think it'll start getting shorter?
Interestingly enough, I don't. Because the narrative arc, like settling in on this sort of 90-minute to 2-hour thing for films, I think is just much more a natural constraint about how humans expect storytelling to work.
Yeah.
I thought otherwise earlier, but the more that I've seen over the years, when you really kind of set down and settle into something, it takes at least 90 minutes to get a good story arc done that fits reasonably well together. And you've seen that get broken by some of the blockbusters. I mean, the Marvel movies are 3 hours long, and they just got so much to pack in, so many explosions. Look, I actually like blockbusters still.
Yeah,
like,
I do too.
Have anything in particular against them. My general speed is a lot more kind of doc and indie and more challenging storytelling. And Fander was also meant to be like make a statement about that, is that with increased availability through the internet and through streaming, that the audience for that could be aggregated in a much more effective fashion. And I do think that'll be proven out over time, by Cinedigm's investment in the space and by a number of different players in the space. And I've talked to some of the bigger players. Warner Media had Filmstruck for a while, which was kind of a copycat of Fandor. And in my discussions with some more senior Warner Media folks, when they killed that, they're like, that was one of the biggest mistakes we made. If you're thinking about how you segment audience over time, that was a very valuable audience. That they could have tried to hang on to, and I mean, I'm glad they didn't. And we actually thought that when Filmstruck got axed, that was going to be the salvation of Fandor, but we had some bad financial structure that had been driven by a whole bunch of bad reasons that just we weren't able to overcome, and so we had to put it into a reorg.
Yeah, it's funny. I just was on Fandor the other day because I had to watch The Watermelon Woman for a class I'm taking, and it's like that's where you find those movies. It's like
that's exactly what it's supposed to be. And we had great plans to sort of have cheap film school access across the world, and these different things, which I think a lot of things that Cinedigm will probably end up doing.
That'll probably go that way. So tell me a little bit about Tent Mender and how you got involved in that. And it's on IMDb TV.
It's on IMDb TV, so streaming for free. And this is one I've been fascinated with. Purpose-based content and the storytelling for social change, and in a partnership with Tom Sebastian and a young woman filmmaker named Laura Hand, who put this all together. We wanted to make a kind of great story about the people on Skid Row in Los Angeles, and so it's focused on 3 main characters and a few ancillary characters who are fascinating.
So
And there's
interesting.
stories of some of it's addiction and redemption, and some of it's
Hmm.
just the daily challenges that they faced and how they've ended up on the streets. And the tent mender is a fictional character, but somebody who had been an addict, who come back, voiced by Peter Coyote. So we have a very interesting, sort of classic voice
Yeah.
covering all of this. And but the subjects are real and they're
Hmm.
fascinating. And so Laura put this together with Tom's help, and we enlisted Procter and Gamble from the start, because we
Oh.
wanted there to be a project that was part of this that would benefit the Midnight Mission and these people who were in
Oh,
Skid Row.
wow.
And so the Tide brand ended up rebuilding the laundry room at the Midnight Mission, and sort of refurbishing everything, and that was part of the story. And we wanted to do, as part of the storytelling, we wanted to make sure that that happened. And then we've also used this as a vehicle to raise money for the Midnight Mission.
It's
And
amazing.
yeah, and because it's an Amazon project, there is an Amazon Smile option to
Mm,
essentially donate supplies to the Midnight Mission in
that's
Los
great.
Angeles. So
And then when you finished it, was there talk about where you would put it, or
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And a bunch of different conversations with some of the major players, with the Netflixes and we talked with some of the other kind of news streamers and things like that. But Amazon was the most natural place to put it, and then figuring out which Amazon brand it fits in. So it is available, even though it's IMDb TV, on Prime Video, on all of your Apple TVs and everything else. If you just search for the Tent Mender, it does come up, and
you can
it's
watch it on
available
that. And then how do you think, because I know
for
you're
free.
involved for
Yeah,
free, and
yeah.
it's really good. It's really just a very heart. I
It's
mean,
beautiful.
obviously,
Laura did a
very
wonderful.
emotional.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, very very emotional and very informative as well. For people that don't really know, you
And,
know,
and
what they
exactly, and
go through.
the separation that so many people have from what's driving the homelessness, sort of epidemic in California in particular, but around the world in a number of different ways. And the loss of empathy that so many people have for those who've ended up in these situations is something that we really wanted to counter. And I think that, I mean, Laura humanizes these people and really shows their struggles, and it's a beautiful, beautiful piece.
100%. I think that that's something that you're absolutely right. There has been a sort of a coldness that I've seen people start to project towards the homeless population. People are just fed up, and so I think it was really
And
timely. You
and
know,
ultimately, the goal for us is to drive social action that makes a difference, and that was
right?
why, including the refurbishment of the laundry room and the importance of just clean clothes to people's dignity and their comfort.
Yes.
Like, we wanted to make a difference as part of the filming.
Yeah,
And then we wanted to hopefully catalyze future social action, and our group will be working together on future projects that
that's
have
great.
kind of impact and social mission. And Procter and Gamble will be backing for further projects in this area that we're in
That's
discussion.
great.
Yeah.
That's great. And especially in the pandemic, what has happened to people with addiction issues and with homelessness, and people who weren't homeless before, who now are facing that, just based on this pandemic that everybody's been through. So it's great. So I know you're involved in Sundance, and I've gotten to go up there a couple of times and experience that. What how do you see things changing in the festival circuit, with regard to what's happened in the world and with what's happening in film now?
Well, I mean, Sundance unfortunately is losing the best executive director that they ever had in Carrie Putnam.
Mm,
As her, she's put in more than 10 years and done an unbelievable job for the Institute, and has been sort of putting out the idea that she was nearing the end of her term for quite some time, and then formally announced it a few months ago, and then actually rotated off, I think a couple of weeks ago now.
mhm.
And I'm sure that they will find an excellent replacement, but it's going to be very hard for them. I think that with the COVID challenge that all festivals have had, um, people are going to want to get together again and watch great movies,
Mhm.
and talk about great movies. And so, I mean, I
Mhm.
think that Sundance this next year, assuming that Delta variant has not sort of overtaken us in a meaningful way. And look, I've been ecstatic that, in a heavily vaxxed set of areas, that most things are still being carried off. Like I said, I was at Bottle Rock yesterday in Napa, which had a vax requirement on the way in, and I think that you're going to see that. I think
More and
that
more.
most film festivals go to vax requirements for indoor screenings.
Sure, as
And
theaters will, and
yeah, exactly. And I think that that's absolutely the right move, is that, mass vaccination is the only answer to shut this down. And that's been true all along. And, those who fight the science, there's not too many in the kind of, funkier film community who aren't actually science oriented.
Right.
But there are some. And
Yes.
so you still have to explain that, no, we believe in science here, and science has vaccinations. So but I think that yearning and that frustration about, losing 18 months or a couple of years to, this awful experience because, because we didn't handle it right in the first place, is the most frustrating part of that.
Right.
People are feeling that, and I see it whenever I've gone to these events that are carrying off with vax mandates and otherwise, that people are they're itching to get out there and experience music and film and all sorts of great camaraderie with people again.
Yes, there's a longing for that. So you think it'll come back in a safer way, but will still be.
Yeah, I think you're going to see vax requirements. You're going to see mask requirements, and people should just suck it up and behave.
Right. And just do it so we can experience all that again. Where do you get your news from when you get up? Like what? Because there's obviously so much that you have to. I mean, you're involved in so many different areas of news of the world.
So much of it is social. I mean, from Facebook and Twitter, and
right.
But I rely on them as my filtering mechanisms for the things that I look at, and then I participate in the news and technology in a number of different ways, and so pay attention to Tech Meme and some of the other plays in that space. I'm busy right now closing a new fund that's focused on investments in artificial intelligence and quantum computing, with some friends and partners. I'm taking my experiments in the crypto community to a lot more active plays with some of the political fights that have come up lately around crypto, and helping out one of my companies in particular called Alchemy. A couple of kids out of Stanford who've done amazing work, and they've built Business Insider describes it as the #1 company in crypto. It's developer tools for the Ethereum blockchain, and I'm spending more and more time with them.
Wow.
And so get a bunch of different news from, Twitter is the best filter for that stuff.
Because you can look at what you want to look at and also get a little bit of everything.
I even encounter a whole bunch of my former colleagues, some of whom are still at Facebook, on Twitter now, in a number of these contexts. Facebook is still quite good for for getting information when your feed is tuned. And it's not that I don't use Facebook, but Twitter is the kind of real-time piece of this, and it's tied into the traditional media in a way that a lot of the traditional media is turned against Facebook, and so you'll see less flow of that into the Facebook ecosystem.
Interesting. What do you think caused that? Was that sort of the privacy stuff?
I mean, some of it's just competition. It's that they fear Facebook more than they fear Twitter, and so they don't want to be feeding their content into that infrastructure. And that's colored the coverage from the beginning. And there, there's an attitude that about both of them, but Twitter never has been as good at monetizing as Facebook has been, and so they're resented less by the mainstream media.
That's interesting. You've obviously done so many things. Is there an area or something that you've never tapped into that you feel like is in your future?
I feel really blessed because I've gotten to experiment in a lot of different areas and learned a lot of different things. And I'm trying to think if there's anything that's kind of missing for me right now. And I would mostly say not really. Like, I get to touch on sports.
And
And a lot of, I think kind of, learning cultures that I've been
Hmm.
able to connect with. And that's why I like the content industry so much, is that
Hmm.
an expectation of constant learning, that I
Yes.
feel very, very comfortable with, and I want to expose my kids to, and that like
Yeah.
the it's a good way a good way to spend time. We've only got a limited amount of time on this earth, and I want to make the most of it.
And there's a lot to do, a lot to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and of course, I didn't really mention politics, which I've dabbled in from
Awesome.
time to time, and still feel like I'm connected to in a meaningful way for me, and
Hmm.
with the particularly with the re-engagement on some of the crypto stuff, trying to make sure that well-intentioned friends of mine whose values I generally share don't make mistakes that harm innovation. And there's been a
Mm.
significant risk of that lately, with good friends in the White House and the Treasury Department,
Hmm.
not understanding the long-term value of crypto and the way that it's operating. And
Hmm.
so, as a trusted party who's been doing politics and business with some of them for 30 years, Ron Klain, the White House Chief of Staff, and we worked together in Clinton '92. But when he's not working for Joe Biden or some other Democratic politician, he's been working for Steve Case, the founder of AOL. And so,
Right.
in Revolution, of the venture firm in DC that Steve Case and Ted Leonsis, who owns the Wizards, as former AOL executive, are part of. So Ron's been in those circles too, and has a read for this, but he's hearing a lot from other friends of ours in the Treasury Department right now who are saying, well, we've got to crack down on this stuff because there's too many scams, and there are some scams in crypto. There's no
Yeah.
question about it,
Yeah.
but at its core, it's about distributing trust in a way that, and having sort of transactions that can be cryptographically proven out, that don't
Hmm.
need traditional intermediaries. And it's a scary thing, but it's also an incredibly important thing that shouldn't be stifled.
So you understand the fears that people have about it, but you're passionate about sort of
About figuring out
helping
how to make
them.
sure that
Yeah.
we capture the innovation in the space. The
Right.
same thing about the internet, and the same thing
Hmm.
about Facebook as the next layer on the internet, as an identity layer that sort of fit over everything.
Hmm.
That I mean, the terrifying, awful things that happen when you interconnect the world. Terrorists can talk together more easily, like and plot awful, awful, destructive things. But
True.
there's so many benefits that overwhelm them, and you have to figure out how your systems adapt to the misuse of those systems. And
Right.
arguably, a lot of people have gone after Facebook for not doing that so well, and I think that there are some legitimate criticisms. um,
Hmm.
but I think that everybody's heart is in the right place over there,
Yeah.
trying to get there, and improve things.
But it's like with anything, right? It's not about shutting it down. It's about learning from where the mistakes were and then building, rebuilding, and
But
growing.
the problem in a regulatory environment is that often people jump to a ban or to a restriction that they don't understand is going to kill things. So
Hmm.
this last fight that we've had in crypto has been about the IRS regulations about who's a broker, um,
Mm.
and what the Treasury Department is trying to maintain these expansive definitions of a broker, and they say, well, we won't use it, but it was like, well, then why are you asking for it? If you want, like, let's talk about what we're really talking about. And then some of the fixes that were proposed were not well thought out, and that they would exempt Bitcoin miners but not Ethereum miners, and like all these things that were just a mess.
Wow.
The whole
Wow.
thing needed to be rethought. There was actually a really good dialogue in the Senate about this, between a bipartisan dialogue with Ron Wyden on the side of the kind of Democratic innovators, Mark Warner, who's usually pretty innovative, mostly backing the Treasury Department in a way that was a little bit dismaying to me. And then Cynthia Lummis, the senator from Wyoming, who's very sophisticated on crypto. I don't agree with her much on much else, but she's very sophisticated on crypto, taking a major role in hammering things out and getting things better. And a compromise was reached that everyone was reasonably happy with. And then it required unanimous consent because of the rules of the Senate, and for pork reasons, Senator Shelby from Alabama blew it up. It only took one senator to blow it up, and they had hopes that it would get unanimous consent, and Shelby blew it up because he didn't get $50 billion for more defense contracts in Alabama.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a
Wow.
bummer.
That's a bummer.
But anyway,
That's
and
a real
the
bummer.
House and Eshoo, who's our congressman here in Silicon Valley, and Zoe Lofgren, who's also incredibly smart congresswoman from San Jose, they've been aggressive in presenting to Nancy. They're quite close with Nancy Pelosi, presenting to her how this needs to get fixed in the House, even though it might not be in the infrastructure bill.
That's exciting, though. That's
I get to
exciting
put
stuff.
my muscles in that area again, and
That's great. It kind of all works together. I mean, so much in so many different spaces, A question I get a lot from people, especially after we made this movie, was, how did you get financing? And what does that look like, and how do you do it? I definitely don't know.
I was able to write a check. It's the way that most of the financing was, and because I believed in the project, and thought that we could do reasonably well in terms of return. And look, it didn't work out financially in its first instantiation, and that's okay. Like those things happen too.
But it's a property, and it's made.
Yeah, it's a property that sits out there, and exactly. And the way that those licensing, when you sell it to a distributor, you're not really selling it; you're leasing it for a long period of time, and it reverts. And there's all sorts of things that we can do with it on the other end. I think eventually it'll probably be profitable, not a lot, but that's okay.
Right. But something will happen, and one thing leads to another thing. But for people that are out there that are, like have a film or have something that they want to do, a project, what do you think is the advice that you can give? I mean, what I always tell people is you sort of have to know before you go after an investor, how is this person going to make their money back? And I think a lot of times with artists, they don't even think that far. They just think all we got to do is just get the money. It's like, well, yeah, but
it's all good. It's like, no. The money's supposed to come back to the investor, right?
Right. So that's like the bare minimum, is kind of understanding how they would get a return and what it would be. But do you have any advice for people that are making films or going in that direction, or even investors, people that are thinking about investing?
A lot of it is track record, and then a lot of it is also kind of star attachment, or pseudo star attachment, or up and comer, or like believing in a couple of the cast members in particular, or believing in a script, or the writer or the director. Like all of those things play pretty significantly in the financiers
decision making of whether they're going to put it in there or not.
Able to identify folks who write checks for these things and who want to be in the business is a significant part of all of that. And so finding those places to mine, I do think that there will be some efforts to make some of film finance a little bit more regularized, that there will be folks who do, like for big movies, that there were a variety of banks and financial players and hedge funds who would do slate vehicles for multiple films, usually with kind of proven out IP sequels, usually, unfortunately. And I think that you'll see some experiment on smaller dollars in that space. And I've had a few conversations with a few people about doing that, and we a couple of us may step up and set up sort of maybe $5 or $10 million funds that expect to finance movies that are made for less than $1 million, but that should be able to they should be tracked to a likely return, either a sale to a distributor who likes those type of movies, or an innovative plan to do it with streaming or other options.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of opportunity, I think, for people to start to come together in a producing sense, to where they can open up some doors, and then like kind of collaborate with creatives in a way to where everybody can sort of make money and move their projects forward. But I think there's a lack of knowledge. I think really that's a big part of it, is that people don't really know. I don't know if it's just needs to be taught more on a school level, where people, go to film school and actually learn more about that part of it.
The understanding the financial markets for film finance should be part of film school. No question.
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, all right. Well, thank you so much for doing the podcast. You were really the angel behind this entire film, because we as we talked about in length in other podcasts, we got there, and as happens, the other half fell out, and we were at that spot. We're like, what do we do? And you were, able to come forward and finance the film and create this project. And I really do think that it does belong on a streaming service where people can easily see it. There's a big part of like just being able to see it, like with your film, The Tent Mender, where people can watch it for free. And, so I think that's hopefully what will happen in the future. But yeah, and you and Dave shared the same birthday, which was so ironic too.
No, I remember that well. And
yeah,
I remember him very fondly.
Yes, as we all do. So thank you so much for doing that, for doing the podcast today, and for all your help with this film. And good to see you.
Excellent. Good to see you too.
All right, cool. And good luck with your podcast.
Thanks so much. Well, yeah. So Fander Festival podcast. On Apple, on Spotify. You can find it wherever.
YouTube, right? And YouTube
as well. So
right?
we do video. So we shoot video in this room with my Lucha Libre guys, and in the background with me and Human and Bryn, who we're borrowing right now from the Alice Morning Radio Show in San Francisco that Human used to be on, the Sarah and Vinny show. So
that's
Bryn
great.
has been a godsend as a producer, and has helped me put together a pretty nice little podcasting studio here.
No, it's great. It sounds great. You guys look great, and you have great guests. It's really interesting. I've watched a couple of episodes. You have my friend Godfrey on.
Godfrey's a lot of fun. Hilarious. So, and he's going to be in Sacramento at the beginning of the season. So I'm going to try to get a game in with him.
That's great. That's great. He's a Kings fan.
Yeah, he's not a Kings fan.
He's going anyway.
In fact, on the podcast, he thought that we were talking about the hockey Kings first. So
the LA Kings, yeah.
But he's a good dude, and it was a hilarious conversation with him.
Yeah, so. It was really funny. It was a good episode. All right, so everybody can check that out. And anything else you want to promote or talk about? Tent Mender on IMDb TV or Amazon
IMDb and IMDb TV, and just find ways to engage in your local community. Find ways to support your local filmmaker. Absolutely,
so that they can get those messages out there. Thanks so much. Great seeing you. All right. Bye.